Hello, hello, everyone. How are you? Friday afternoon. It must be some more British history time with me, Chris Green, the history chap. Lovely. Already, I can see people in the chat box going mad. We've got Leslie over South Carolina, Charlie Manson up in Yorkshire. Love to see you, Charlie. I saw Jen somewhere. Cumbria. It's cloudy and a bit rainy in Cumbria. Isn't it always, Jen? We've got Grant over in Norway. Fantastic. Chip. Good to see you, Chip, over in the US as well. Blimey, nothing but sunshine. Oh, okay. And so we've got loads of folks starting to already get in. We've got 16 folk on the call already, which is nice. And how are you all doing? What have you been up to this week? What history things have you managed to read or watch or visit this week? I'd be intrigued. I'm off to Bath this weekend, which should be great. It's a while since I've been there. The last time I was there, it was rainy and horrible. So, yeah, it might be the same. But, of course, Bath, great Roman ruins, but some great medieval stuff as well. And, of course, Bath, the place where the very first English coronation or coronation service of a king of England, as we still see them, started with Edgar the Peaceful, way back in Anglo-Saxon times. So, yeah, quite cool place. I fancy going up Salisbury Hill outside. And I defy you to. I'll be halfway up Salisbury Hill, if that, before starting to sing the Peter Gabriel song, of course, of Salisbury Hill. But there you go. Maybe showing my age, probably. So anyway, how are you all doing? That's good. Just started a great book as well from up in where are we? The Battle for the Island Kingdom. This is going back, actually, fun enough to mention the Anglo-Saxons just now, but yes, this is starting really interesting, talking not so much, well, at the very end of the Anglo-Saxons, 1000 to 1066, which of course is really interesting because this is the time that the Danes conquered England. And people forget about that. Everyone goes on about the Norman conquest, and in fairness, that was seismic in the way that England was governed, in where England came to, and in fact, by default, the rest of Britain too, and the British Isles too. But yeah, for a period, don't forget, the Danes have been in control of England with King Canute, and of course Sweyn Forkbeard as well. And this is the time of Ethelred the Unready and Edmund Ironside. So some really interesting stuff. Enjoying it, actually. Quite an easy read. Which is if I haven't got Sarah talking to me about interior decorations and things like that. And strange enough, that's why we're going to Bath. But I'm just going to be she wants to go and see some shops. But I think I'll throw in a few history sidelines. Do you think I'll get away with it? Right. Anyway, let me put that back on the shelf and let's get going. So this is normal talk about the events that happened in British history this week. And there's more folk joining. Historic Scott, 1800. Hello there to you. I've got John Clark. Chip, you're reading Max Hastings' Armageddon. What do you think of it? I quite like Max Hastings' books, I have to say. But yeah. Neil Morrison, you hope that you've not missed the main Scottish event of the week. I've got two for you, all right? You might have guessed one of them, because every Scot knows that one. But I wonder what else happened this week up in Scotland that is worth a little chat. Have you... go on, Neil. Give us a guess. Give us a guess. So, Uncle Heavy, hello to you too. It's really nice actually having so many people. One of the things I really love about these lives is just the interaction we all have, and it always feels almost like a little bit like a community of history enthusiasts, history buffs, whatever we call ourselves. And it's nice, isn't it? And my history story was it was the subject I fell in love with at school. Mr. Hans, my first teacher, taught me about the Phoenicians. He's one of those old school, you started as early as you did and you slowly worked your way forward. And I learned about the Egyptians. And I just fell in love with history. Ended up at university studying medieval and modern history, specialising in the modern, so-called. That's modern, medieval and modern. I mean, basically went from Charlemagne through to the Vietnam War. that's a small part of history, isn't it? Ended up graduating from University of Birmingham way back in the day. Got a second-class degree, first class degree in socialising and partying, but second-class degree in history. And then decided I really didn't want to be a teacher. I had a choice, teaching the subject I love, but earning a teacher's salary, or going into industry, nothing I loved, but earning an industry salary. And funny enough, I went down that route. And long story short, became self-employed, became a consultant, teaching, doing management skills, especially public speaking, coaching. We ended up in COVID with lockdown. And strangely enough, no one wanted public speaking and presentation skills, during COVID. In fact, they weren't quite sure if they had a job, let alone doing presentations. And so it was that several of my friends said to me, Chris, you tell great stories from history. I wish you were the teacher we'd had at for history. We might have actually been more interested in it. Just tell us some stories on the internet. And so I researched and told a particular story that was relevant to COVID, I guess, which was all about the plague hitting Britain in the 1660s and the village of Eyam in Derbyshire, which went into its own self-imposed lockdown when they got the plague and decided they weren't going to pass it on to the surrounding communities. It's an amazing story. It is in my library. I've recorded it since, and it's in my library of videos on YouTube. But a really great story. No battles or anything like that, I'm afraid to say. Although I do talk a bit about battles and managed to get them in there somehow. And it all took off from there. Amazingly, this was in lockdown, and they said do it on Facebook Live. And then they said, oh, actually, we can't make it. Could you record it? And I thought, well, you're in lockdown. What the hell are you doing if you're not watching me? You're doing my live. But anyway, put it on YouTube. And the rest, as they say, is history. And not quite 4 years. 4 years in August this year will be the story of the history chap. And amazing. I then told a story about Zulu at the anniversary in January, of the anniversary of the battles of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift. And that just suddenly took off. The rest of it had been bumbling along. And then I told a story about Gordon of Khartoum, and that was all right. And I thought, well, if I've done Gordon, I've got to finish the story off by talking about, the British Empire Strikes Back, Kitchener, and the Battle of Omdurman. And that was the one that absolutely exploded on YouTube. And that was in early 22. So really, the YouTube journey has really been, just over 2 years. It's been phenomenal. Now over 1 million views a month on YouTube. I've got my podcast channel. I'm going out speaking. In fact, 2 weeks' time, I am speaking at the Canadian Pavilion at Bisley National Shooting Centre. And I'm doing some work. I'm in collaboration. I'm going to be the resident historian for the Canadian Pavilion. Early days. And I'm actually going to be speaking to the Canadian shooting team who are visiting and talking about General Sir William Butler, British Army general during the Victorian period, Irishman, but who had an absolute history with Canada and the native peoples of Canada as well. And I've recently released a video about him because he was the general who was very sympathetic to the Boers and really didn't want Milner and Cecil Rhodes and co fighting the Boers in South Africa. So he got removed. He was singing from the wrong hymn sheet, as it were. So there you go. Story of Uncle Heavy. Story of Eyam is an amazing self-sacrifice. Absolutely. As I say, it's not your battle. It's not your blood and guts battles. Okay, there's not vast amounts of politics. It's about ordinary people not waiting for the president or the prime minister or the king or anything to sort their lives out, but actually making a stand for themselves. And the self-sacrifice, the plague. I mean, we all got about COVID, and I'm sure one or two of you are highly suspicious of COVID. Others of us got all the jabs, but the plague, bubonic plague, basically took out a third of a town. Not a third of the people who caught it, a third of the population. So imagine that arriving in your town, in your community, in your street. Okay, someone down the road has got bubonic plague. The law of averages, statistically, all the way back to the Black Death, a third of you are going to be gone pretty damn fast as well. It used to kill within 24 hours of catching it. That's how quick you could go. And imagine someone then coming along down your street and saying, we're not going to spread it around the rest of the town, or we're not going to spread it from our town to the next communities. We're going to go into self-sacrifice. We're going to go into self-lockdown, but a third of us are probably going to pay the price. I mean, let's be honest. There are military campaigns where a third of the men do not pay the price. And they're the pros fighting a battle. These are common or cardinal people in 1660s. They didn't have Wikipedia or anything else to work out what bubonic plague was. They just prayed and believed in old wives' tales. So, yeah, thank you very much for that, Uncle Heavy. Off on one there. Easy Gamer, killing it. Thank you very much indeed, mate. Charlie Manson, the Scottish company. It's not. I've got an even better Scottish story then, haven't I? Um, I played ice hockey for 10 years. Naturally love Canada. Yeah, only been there once. Went to Niagara Falls. Well, two things. Niagara Falls, impressive natural history, and then you've actually got Niagara, which is like Blackpool next to the Niagara Falls, isn't it? It's which I always think. I mean, I always laugh when I've been to Vegas. You've got Grand Canyon down the road, like nature's one of nature's great wonders, and then you have the Strip in Vegas, which is almost like Mammon's great wonders, isn't it? So side by side. So look, so 4 years on, and I'm just impressed. You know, we have these conversations here. The amount of comments I get. I've actually got someone now. I've got them into my team. My team. It's two of us. My team. Barbara is reading a lot of the comments for me on YouTube because I'm getting so many. Last night's video about Battle of Plessy, I've had over 250 comments. And realistically, I just do not have time to read all of those myself. So she's filtering them. She's taking out the woke comments. You know, the British should never have been in India. She's taking out the right-wing comments. Now they're all over here. All of that crap gets thrown away from both sides. I like to tell a story straight down the middle, really. And you know, I'm talking to adults. You make up your own decisions whether the British in India was good or bad. And as Indians, you can make up your own decisions. And what you'll probably see is there's some good, there's some bad, and there's a whole lot of stuff in the middle. Because that's life, isn't it? And history is just a reflection. That's just part of our story. So so I love getting that. And I just love talking to people who sort of share my beliefs and my passions about, you know, British history. And that history is just full of great stories. And you love me telling them, I guess. But, you know, I certainly love talking about them. So obviously not, you know, my channel's not for everyone. Know that. There are people who think I go on for too long. You know, they like a video, the World War II explained to them in 3 minutes. The British in India. Here we go. The Irish, Ireland, or Israel, Palestine in 2 minutes with cartoons. Lots of flicky stuff. And if that's you, then yeah, you ain't a History Chap fan, I'm sure. But if you like people like I do, lifting up the bonnet a bit, diving in, finding some of the details, telling a really good story, focusing on British history, not world history, not because I'm proud necessarily of British history per se, but it's just where I live, you know. And I enjoy it. It's all around me. If you're, you know, I love people who don't beat up British history. You know, it's part of the story, and it's not all been good at all. But then where do you draw the line? You know. Should reading my book there, should some of the Anglo-Saxons be asking for compensation from Denmark because Sweyn Forkbeard was bashing up the country back in the 1000s? I don't know. Where do you draw the line? And where do you stop? There's a fine line between being nationalistic and a fine line between being nationalistic and covering yourself in a sackcloth and ashes. And I just like telling the stories, quite frankly. Don't know about you guys. I guess that's why you're here still. Otherwise, you'd have signed off by now, wouldn't you? You'd be looking for the short cartoons, 2-minute history on Ireland. Thank you very much. Yeah, there's a thing that someone's just put here about, they saw I changed the thumbnail on Plessy. I was actually doing a trial. There's a new thing in YouTube, where you can actually put two thumbnails against each other, see which one's working the best over a period of time. I think you got up to 24 hours, I think, but I made a call after about 10, which was, and it tells you which one's performing better. So that's a cool little tool they've got there. It's not bad, is it? Easy Gamer, you think 147,000 subs says you're doing pretty well. I think so. Funnily enough, I was on a train coming back from London last week, and I met some youths. I thought they were actually going. It was coming past Oxford, so I thought that maybe they were in first year at Oxford Uni. They look young, but then I think I look old to them. So we got chatting, and oh no, they just finished their GCSEs. And, they're all going to a party. They all had a beer, and they're all drinking on the train. And they said, "What do you do?" So I told them, you know, I've got a channel on YouTube. So of course, they're all Gen Z, aren't they? Generation Z. And they were like, "Oh, well, tell us what it is." So they all went on their phones, and they were like shit, you've got 147,000 subscribers. And they were like, they're like, man, you're like YouTube royalty, which was very nice because I'm definitely not compared to the really big people like Mark Felton. But yeah, that was quite fun. I think they were a bit. I think they were a bit bowled over that anyone without a goatee beard and a beanie hat was a YouTuber. But there you go. So look, so yeah, I love, and of course, a lot of you love the fact that I go down these rabbit holes all the time, and we find really interesting things. And I try and pull them out and put into some of my videos. But I certainly go down rabbit holes with these live calls, don't I? And it helps or doesn't help. The fact I keep looking over at your comments, and you'll throw stuff into the conversation, and off I go again. And that's one of the things I really love. And it's one of the things I've always wanted with the History Chap. Is I've always got a vision, okay, it's not going to happen yet, but I've got this vision of almost having like the gathering of the clans, where people like us come together. Maybe it's a Saturday morning, maybe it's live, as in person somewhere, maybe it's, there's a bank of screens I'm looking at, and I'm speaking to people from all around the world. Maybe I've even got some guests with me sharing their passions for history as well. But we actually come together like almost right round a giant pub table, virtual pub table, or a giant campfire, and we just share stories about history and our passions, our knowledge, because you guys tell me a lot of stuff as well, which is really cool. Several really good comments about the Battle of Plassey and about Clive and about the East India Company that I didn't know, that were thrown into the comments last night. So thank you very much for that. You love pointing me down those rabbit holes. I've just got to find my way out of them sometimes, haven't I? Here's a little rabbit hole. I hope loads of you have seen the Battle of Plassey. Actually, I'll come back to the rabbit hole in a moment. Okay, but I've come to a conclusion over the last couple of weeks, and this is quite an important bit, okay, but that I want to spend more time with fellow history enthusiasts, probably like yourselves, okay? And yeah, that vision is ultimately there will be some sort of gathering of the clans. That's my vision. Don't know when it's going to happen. It's not top of mind. Have got some potential places to try and do something at the back end of this year. Might be an in-person event here in the UK. I'd love to meet some of you guys, just to almost to say, look, okay, I'm at the battlefield at Naseby in 2 weeks' time. I'm going down to Sedgemoor. I'm going down to Hastings. Anyone in the area? Let's just meet up. We'll walk the battlefield together. Go and grab a coffee. Go and grab a pint of beer and a sandwich or something. Wouldn't that be great? Just all come together every now and then. I appreciate people like Leslie. It's going to be a little bit harder from South Carolina to get over to Hastings battlefield, but you never know. You could always be in the vicinities. But also, as I say, to have that virtual thing. So one of the things I've always talked about, one of the challenges here with YouTube as well, is that we're not physically able to see you. I can see all your comments, but sometimes I can, be nice to actually feel like I'm talking to people around a room and around a table. But and Easy Gamer, by the way, has just said Franz Ferdinand was shot today in 1914. Oh, nice one. But just bear with us. So based upon that, I've got two big announcements today. Okay. First, going forward, my lives, I'm thinking they might be still on here. They might be YouTube. Zoom. Okay. So I'm going to have the lives, but what I am going to do is I'm going to make them a closed community. In other words, you've got to be a member to join in the lives going forward. They won't be just out here on YouTube, nor will the recordings. The recordings will just be for people who join a club, okay? Club of people who enjoy British history. And I guess the second part is, therefore, there's going to be a club. And the club really is to bring us all together a lot more. It's not just, I'm not really after the money, don't get me wrong, don't mind the money, but this is really about actually getting people together. So from now on, we'll have weekly live chats like this in a closed group, okay, a private group. There will also be bi-monthly quizzes, history quizzes, where we come together, and it's a bit of fun. But from now on, we're going to go those every other month. There'll be a bit of a history quiz. It'll be on Zoom, so people can join in from wherever they are in the world. Okay, the good news is you're sitting at home, so you can cheat like there's no tomorrow. You mark your own stuff. It's actually about having fun, learning a bit, meeting some other history buffs and people who enjoy history as well. And again, people chiming in and throwing in their own thoughts and knowledge. You're also going to have access to a library. All my videos are going to be in one place on a members website, members portal. So you, rather than going backwards and forwards through YouTube trying to find them, they're going to be categorized. They're going to be categorized into things like World War II, 19th century, might break the 19th century into like Zulu Wars, Sudan, Napoleonic Wars. So you can find the bits that you're really interested in. And if I'm twittering about Eam or Eam, the plague village, you look at it and think, I bet that's under the tab called General British History, because it ain't going to be World War II, is it? And you can go straight there and find it. There's also going to be, I'm going to introduce 2 levels. Okay, at the additional level, there's going to be a monthly interactive talk where that will be on Zoom, and I will be able to dive in and go either whether you want to call it deep dive or down those rabbit holes, and start to talk about some of the niche things that just we know will not get traction on YouTube. Some of the personalities, some of the smaller events, some of the smaller battles, maybe stories about particular regiments and things like that. And also, I'd like to flick that between some sort of teaching stories and how about some discussions from alternative history, like, what would have happened in Britain had the Nazis taken over? Would it have been this defiant hotbed of resistance? Or would it have been a collaborationist, more like Vichy France? And we could talk a few more like that. What would have happened if Clive hadn't won the Battle of Plassey and the British had just remained trading with India rather than imperial masters of India? What would have been the impact of that? Because it's quite interesting, isn't it, when you think about that? What would have happened if the American colonists had lost the War of Independence? Yeah. And you can have a real debate, a bit like being in a pub, being around a campfire. And the other thing that we will have in that other level will be, a couple of years ago, I did a series. Okay, again, it was a closed series. It's a paid-for series, 195 quid, and it was actually the story of Britain. 27 videos. I recorded them all, telling the story of Britain from the Ice Age right up to the Industrial Revolution. And there's a few more that I still would like to add to that to bring it to the end, certainly up to the First World War. So work in progress, isn't it always, folks? But there's 27 videos sitting there at the minute. You get access to all of those. So if you want to find out more about that membership, okay, and what I'm doing as well, I am bringing my YouTube members channel is going to get closed down at the end of today, Friday. And you will now have the opportunity just to move over to one place. I'm bringing everyone together in one place. It's the beginning of the gathering of the clans. So my Patreon site is going to be taken down as well. And my patrons will be invited to come over and join the History Chap Supporters Club. Membership here on YouTube is going to be closed down as well. You're under no obligation, but it would be lovely if you could join me. And if you want to come across, there's a link in underneath now. Okay, it's called join my tribe, and there's the link to the History Chap Supporters Club. The other thing, if you join by the end of Sunday, so the end of this month, June, okay, by the end of Play Sunday, you'll be put in for a prize draw. I'm actually putting this up for a prize. Okay, this is well, you can see if I stand up, it's big. It's big. And it is by artist Steve Noon. It's a print. It's from the Battle of Cluban in Anglo-Zulu Wars. It's actually somewhere there, signed. It's I'm getting myself backwards and forwards. Yeah, it's signed by Steve, as you can see there. It's also numbered. It's a numbered print. This will be available to anybody who joins the History Chap Supporters Club before the end of this month. Prize draw, worth it, and I'll send that anywhere in the world. It's a big beast, isn't it? So might be appealing to some of you. And if it isn't, it's always a good present to give to someone else, isn't it? Someone else who likes military history or Zulu Wars or whatever. So there you go. So hopefully it might not be for all of you. I appreciate that. And my regular videos will still come out on YouTube. But hopefully what I still will start to see is the more folk that join me and we all come together as history enthusiasts in the channel, I'll spend more time with them and a little bit less time producing videos on YouTube. That's not going to happen immediately. Nothing. Those of you who've also got my newsletter, you'll continue to get my newsletter. That's absolutely fine as well. And by the way, those of you who don't know what on earth I'm talking about with the newsletter, if you join the Supporters Club, you'll get an email every week with news about what I'm up to, the latest videos, latest podcasts. If I'm speaking privately, speaking in public, anything like that, you'll be kept informed. And indeed, you'll get a summary of the dates, things that happened in British history this week. Which is a beautiful segue, isn't it, to saying what the hell happened in British history this week. Let me just very quickly, before I get that, just check the comments. Scupper flow. Yeah, interesting. Johnny No Chance. I remember going to Eam with primary school. Yeah, it's one of those classics, I think, Johnny. I'm guessing you either lived in Derbyshire, Sheffield, Chesterfield, somewhere like that, because Eam, it's not the easiest place to get to, but anyone who's lived over that part of England has been to Eam. And if you're trying to work out Eam, look in there with Johnny No Chance. Eam is spelt E-Y-A-M. Most people from outside of the area will call it Eam. And then they get shot down by anybody from that little bit of Derbyshire who says, it's not Eam, it's Eam. English language, hey, brill. Certainly English language in England, brill. No, Easy Gamer, I said that there's going to be one membership. Sorry, let me get this right. Big pun there. Okay. We're going to have lives. They might be here on YouTube, but that is because I will make this a private link. It will not be open to anybody. And therefore, that is why the membership on YouTube will be closed. And you can transfer your membership, Easy Gamer. Because I will close the channel, you won't get charged by YouTube anymore. Okay. And then you can come over and have a look at the historychap.com/supporters club and decide if you want to join that. And that would be the only place you can join. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, put another question in, please. Nottinghamshire, of course, Johnny No Chance. North Notts would have also gone to Eam as well. Oh yeah, Uncle Heavy. Will there be a chance? Yes. Okay. A couple of things. Two things. There's going to be two levels. For those of you who are my YouTube supporters at the moment, okay, in YouTube memberships, it's the same. It's the same levels. We've got Waterloo, and we've got Trafalgar. And Waterloo, a penny a month more, but you're getting the quizzes. You're getting the library as well. Trafalgar, it's £2, £1 a month more, £1 and a penny a month more. You're getting the whole of that. You're getting the live discussions every month, and you're getting the access to the 27-part History of the Story of Britain series. Okay, and there will be annual memberships, 20% off if you join for an annual fee. So so that basically is Waterloo membership, 50 quid a year. Trafalgar, instead of 120, which is like 12 lots of £10, it's 95. So yes, you've got ability. I've also changed it so that those of you who like paying by PayPal, there's a PayPal option as well when you go to the checkout. Okay. So hopefully that's sort of got to that. So shall we crack on with a little bit of British history this week? Let me start with the 23rd of June, 1757, the Battle of Plassey. Yay! We did the video. Deliberately did it this week. I've asked you guys, if you notice, there's been polls on YouTube asking, what battles. Funny enough, I'm trying to align stuff to historic dates in history during the year. And so the Battle of Plassey, Robert Clive leads a small East India Company army against a massive army from of the Nawab of Bengal. And the backstory is fascinating. The backstory to India is fascinating because I think there's a very simplistic narrative, which is the British came, they conquered India. They were beeps. They used technology to beat the Indians. Actually, there was a lot of skullduggery. Basically, the Nawab lost. He lost principally, actually, nothing to do with Clive per se. He lost because his generals betrayed him. I say not due to Clive. Clive had bribed them to betray them, so he was instrumental in the victory. But what's interesting is fundamentally, and it's something I meant to say in the video actually, is victories come in all different shapes and sizes, don't they? And sometimes you can win a victory just because the other side betray their leader, and that's what happened with the Nawab of Bengal. Cutting long story short, it ended up with the British becoming de facto rulers of Bengal, most prosperous area of India at the time. And that was the beginning of the sort of the imperial rule in India. Up until then, there'd been trading companies just with small forts along the coast, places like Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and fighting rival East India's companies from other nations, not least the French. And the French, of course, were at Pondicherry. And here's a little rabbit hole for you. I said I'd go down a rabbit hole just now. But if you've watched the Plassey video, you'll know that basically the victory in Bengal, part of the victory in Bengal prior to winning at Plassey, Clive had taken out the French fort at Chandranagara, which is just north of Calcutta. And really, the crushing of that fort and the defeat of their ally, the Nawab of Bengal, knackered French ambitions in Bengal, and obviously put the British East India Company in the pole position. What's interesting is that, strange enough, Chandranagara was given back to the French, minus its fort, and it remained a French colony right up until independence. It's a suburb of Calcutta, and in fact, even while the British were there, it was basically they had this tiny French colony, a suburb of Calcutta, surrounded by British-owned Calcutta and British-owned India beyond that, and there were 3 other ports that the French retained until after Indian independence. Most significant one was Pondicherry, down near Madras, or Chennai, as it's now called. And of course, likewise, the Portuguese continued to hold their little territory of Goa until after British independence. So bizarrely, after the British had cleared off at the end of the Raj, Pondicherry and Goa were foreign enclaves on the Indian subcontinent for another best part of 10 years, 10, 15 years. So there you go, nice little history there. And what I love is there were these other, we forget East India Company, the Danish East India Company. What was that all about? The Dutch East India Company, long history there. And there was even an Austrian East India Company, also the Ostend East India Company, Ostend Trading Company. So some fascinating stuff in there, isn't there? So there you go. Let me have a quick look here. Johnny No Chance, Newark, not far from the Battle of Stoke Field. Want to do one about the Battle of Stoke Field. Johnny, I said the History Chap on tour. I think Stoke Field could be a really good one to go to. Long time since I've been there. So maybe one in the Midlands would be good. So maybe I'll go to Stoke Field and just say to people, let's meet, go to a pub, have lunch, chat, clear off. Some claim historians that the plots against Udwala already existed and Clive merely joined. Just for clarity, I think he was not a popular. The Nawab was not a popular ruler of Bengal. He was young. He was about 20. He was, he was like a lot of 20-year-old spoilt brats, quite frankly. Oh, sorry, that's one interpretation, Chris' interpretation. And there were people out to get him. The whole of India was an absolute snake pit at this time. Nominally the Mughal emperor in Delhi was in charge, but heck, Mysore, the Marathas, Bengal, the Nawab of Bengal, they were all having different, and actually the Nawab of Bengal, he withheld payments, or they had withheld payments to Delhi. So it was a complete basket case. And these different rulers were trying to use the Europeans as leverage, jockeying for position. If I've got the French on my side, they can bring their cannons, I can defeat the Marathas. Oh, by the way, we had the Afghans. The Afghans were raiding deep into India at this time as well. That was another thing. You had the Sikhs kicking off as well. So loads of stuff. They were using the Europeans. And of course, the Europeans were playing it the other way. They were deciding to play off the different states against each other and the different internal conflicts in those states. So I think actually you're absolutely right there. Sorry, I've lost who said it, but anyway, someone's making something about the old Five Nations. Oh, Easy Gamer, you just joined on Trafalgar level. Thank you very much indeed, mate. Thank you very much. Now YouTube can't steal 30% from me. Shall I let you into a secret? It's more. I don't end up with 70%. Keep going down. And I'll be honest, actually, part of the fun with the membership is going to be you're not reliant on the vagaries of the YouTube algorithm or the YouTube the advertising revenue, which goes all over the show. Nothing against it, again, and I'm very grateful for everything YouTube do for me. I've got a YouTube coach. So I'm not dishing YouTube. In fact, my water, look at this. I'm a YouTube creator. Some of you will know I was invited just before Christmas to a YouTube Creators Conference in Birmingham. Remember, I was talking to you about those 16-year-olds on the train and how, they couldn't believe a grizzled old fart like me was on YouTube. Trust me, similar reaction when I went to the YouTube Creators event as well. And then loads of them were like, bloody hell, you're quite a serious channel, aren't you, compared to what we do? We just walk around shops in Birmingham interviewing people and that. And you've got a hell of a lot more subscribers. But that comes down to hard work, doesn't it? And consistency. That's my view. Oh, thanks, Uncle Heavy. Mike Disabled Welshman, I'm not going to stop these YouTube Friday chats. Unfortunately, I will be. Yeah, I'm going to make it a closed club from now on. I will do the odd live here, but it will not be consistently here. The consistent live on a Friday is going to be for members only. Okay. Thank you, Jen. Jen signed up for Trafalgar. Yes, you have. Thank you very much. I was going to give you a shout out, Jen. Right. So we've done Plassey. And on the 23rd, I want to actually go back 30 years for the 23rd of June to Scotland. All right. So here we go, Scots. It's not Bannockburn. 23rd of June, 1725, the malt tax riots. What the hell were these? Well, malt, an important commodity at the time, especially in Scotland, principally in the brewing of beer, but also, of course, in the production of whiskey, and also in some cases bread as well. But there'd been a duty on malt down in England for some time while they were fighting the French. Basically, wars cost money, so duties get stuck on anything during a war, certainly in these times, to raise cash. In the union between England and Scotland in 1707, which formed the country of Great Britain, they wanted to align all the tax regimes, and they did, in most cases, align most of the tax regimes, with one notable exception. The Scots had never had a duty on malt. And the English, there was a lot of political pushback. And the English, or the Parliament down in London, it wasn't an English Parliament anymore, it was a British Parliament made up of principally English people, but decided that they would not impose the malt duties in Scotland. So, result for Scotland. In fact, in 1713, the war was getting, the treasury was getting a bit empty, and they contemplated it again. And again, there was outrage in Scotland, so they backed off. Result 2 for Scotland. And then finally in 1725, the House of Commons had enough and said, no, we're going to impose a tax. We will put a duty in Scotland. However, it will only be 50% of what they pay down in England. So they got the tax. Maybe that's one for Parliament in London, but the Scots got 50% discount. So maybe a result, maybe a score draw there for England and Scotland. Well, even with that 50% reduction, this was a new tax, and nobody likes new taxes, do they? Do we? And uproar in Scotland, not least in the brewing industry, because this was going to raise significantly the price, not just the brewers and how they make money, but they were going to press. There was only one way they were going to make any money. They were going to pass the costs on to Joe Public. And you've got to remember, beer was a significant drink back in Georgian times, not least because it actually was. It was clarified water. It's pure water, which made it, in many cases, safer to drink than some of the so-called drinking water in towns in particular. So outrage in Scotland. And when the tax collectors arrived on the 23rd of June, 1725 in Glasgow, they were met by a mob. In fact, the fire alarm bell, the bell that was rung for when there was a fire in the town, was rung. Hundreds of people came onto the streets of Glasgow. The crowd told these tax collectors they would get stoned if they tried to go in and count the amount of malt that was in all the breweries. And in fact, there were piles of stones ominously placed outside any of the stores where there was malt. So these people were definitely intent on stoning the tax collectors if they tried it. And so they had to back off. They were basically fled. But the riot, as ever with these things, a riot started to break out in Glasgow. A principal riot was actually in Hamilton, just outside Glasgow, but it spread across the lowlands of Scotland towards Edinburgh, but across that central belt of Scotland. And finally, in Glasgow, as I say, got out of hand, And now they vented their fury on a place called Shorefield Mansion. Shorefield Mansion was owned by the Member of Parliament for Glasgow, a very successful trader, originally started in New England, come over, set himself up in Glasgow, was trading in lots of things, including slaves. And his name was Daniel Campbell. Daniel Campbell was, as I say, was financially well off enough to purchase become the Member of Parliament for Glasgow. And he then basically he voted for the malt tax. So Scottish Member of Parliament down in London votes to impose a tax on Scotland. How's that going to go down with the good folk of Glasgow? Well, badly, because they basically ransacked his mansion in centre of Glasgow. At this stage, the army were now called out to restore order. And the army were brought in, and without reading the Riot Act, they opened fire on the mob. And something like 9 people were killed, a further 16 wounded. Basically the authorities in Glasgow then said, actually, you're more blinking, you're adding fuel to the fire here. Get out of the city or out of the town. So the army retreated. They were attacked again as they left, fired a few more shots. It's believed people were killed then, but I can't find the particular figures. And that fundamentally ended up, that was the malt tax riots. The tax stayed, and various General Wade of the British Army came down and restored order in Glasgow. Several of the ringleaders were flogged, and several were sent to America, to the American colonies as punishment, because we didn't have Australia in those days. So 1725, malt tax riots. How about that? George in England. It was a basket case, wasn't it? Vicious place. George in England. Dick Turpin. Yeah, we had the Jacobite risings, malt tax riots. We've got the Gordon riots. It went on. It was a fascinating era, and we just saw it's a bit of a black hole over here in Britain. I don't know what people like Leslie and that over in America, how it's treated over there. But I guess it's all very much from a colonist's perspective from America about breaking away from Britain and tyrannical rule from London. But fundamentally, Brits, what do? We acknowledge there was an American War of Independence, but as we lost it, we don't really concentrate on that one. And then we zip forward, a bit of Industrial Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, because we won that one. And everything else, especially that early bit of the Georgian period, which, there were 4 King Georges on the trot, spanning 115, 113, 117 years, something like that. So a massive piece of British history, which we don't know too much about, isn't it? So there you go. Cara, thank you very much. Waterloo, be super. I'm not asking, and some of you, this isn't for you, by the way. The membership isn't for you, but I would suggest, if you like keeping in touch with my stuff, pop over to the website. Again, link in the bottom there, and just sign up for the newsletter. That's free. And at least you know what the hell I'm doing and when I've produced new videos on YouTube, so you don't have to go hunting for them, because there's a link from the newsletter straight across to YouTube or to that video. Okay, we've got to go. Keep in Scotland, shall we? The 24th of June, 1314, the Battle of Bannockburn. Well, no good Scot cannot know about the Battle of Bannockburn, and no good Scot cannot resist telling any English person about the Battle of Bannockburn. This was in this long history between England and Scotland. And Edward I, those of you who know a bit of your English history and Scottish history, Edward I had, cutting a long story short, had invaded Scotland and had subjugated large parts of Scotland. While Edward I was still alive, Robert Bruce in 1306 led a rebellion against him. Edward was keen to put down the rebellion, but in 1314 he died, and he was succeeded by his son, Edward II. Edward I, also known as Longshanks, was one of these, if you want a hard ruler, military ruler, Edward I is up there. Incredible. He won the battle of, effectively, he won the battle of Evesham against Simon de Montfort. He conquered what was left of independent North Wales. He was known as, he called himself the Hammer of the Scots. And his son was the polar opposite. If he could have been on stage or something, Edward II probably would have been. Nevertheless, he was threatened with this rebellion by Robert Bruce up in Scotland, and he led an army into Scotland. Biggest English army ever to invade Scotland, 20,000 strong. And just south of Stirling, at Bannockburn, the two armies met. 20,000 English, a lot of them cavalry, against 5,000 Scots under Robert Bruce. The battle actually lasted 2 days, and without going into the ins and outs, because I would like to tell this story as a proper video here on YouTube. That would set the cats amongst the pigeons, won't it? To have an Englishman doing a story about Bannockburn. In fairness, my nan was Scottish, so it's not like it's totally out of my blood. The English army, 20,000 strong, crushed by 5,000 Scots. 13,000 of the 20,000 English army were killed at Bannockburn. Unbelievable defeat when you look at the things. If you're ever talking about a great victory, Bannockburn, is up there, isn't it? So, as one of the great victories of all time, I would suggest, actually, when you look at both the numbers and also the fact that actually the quality of the English troops that came against them. It wasn't an army of levies, serious warriors in the English army. Edward II was only narrowly escaped being captured himself. He had to get whisked off the field when it was all going horribly wrong. And the victory at Bannockburn basically sealed Scottish independence until James VI of Scotland inherited the English throne in 1603. So there you go, Bannockburn. And where have we got Charlie Manson, YouTube Premium, and 4 chosen. Thank you. So what do you think? Should I do one about Bannockburn sometimes? I'd be very... Neil, do you think an Englishman doing Bannockburn would work? Do I have to produce Granny McEwen's picture to say, yeah, I've got some blood, really? But tell us what you think. Should Bannockburn? By the way, speaking of great British battles, Battle of the Boyne coming up in the near future. Next week, I am going into 19th century British history, and we're going to be talking... Sorry, where are we? Boyne is next week. Battle of Boyne next week. And the week after is the West Africa Squadron. The West Africa Anti-Slavery Squadron from the Royal Navy in the 19th century. Britain's fight against slavery. Which many of you might not be aware of, some of you probably are, but it was this moment that Britain, having been one of the main players in the transatlantic slave trade, then of course outlawed slavery, abolished slavery in the British Empire, and initially the trading and then the ownership of slaves, and set up a Royal Navy squadron to stop other nations participating in the transatlantic slave trade. So this is sort of the military version of being a reformed smoker. And and the Royal Navy, in fairness, rescued a hell of a lot of hundreds of thousands, freed hundreds of thousands of Africans who were being taken to slavery, principally by people like the Portuguese, who were still trading in slaves, and Brazil, who were trading in slaves well into the 19th century. And the only European nation who actually did do anything like that, despite other nations abolishing slavery, like the French, the Royal Navy were the only ones doing anything significant, trying to outlaw the trade there. And of course, we took that moral mission round onto the east coast of Africa, where the Arabs were still trading slaves out of Zanzibar. And that led to the shortest war in history, the Anglo-Zanzibar War, which I've done a video on as well. So where are we at? Let's go here. 24th of June, 1340, the Battle of Sluys. This was Edward III, actually. So we're going through our Edwards here. Right at the beginning of the 100 Years' War, it was a naval battle. And don't want to go into too much detail because I put it in a poll recently and it actually got quite a lot of interest. People were like, never heard of it, love to hear about it. So here's just a top line for you. Naval battle, beginning of the 100 Years' War between England and France. English fleet led in person by Edward III. Okay, sea battle led by Edward III. Of about 120, 150 ships, went across to Sluys, which is near Ostend in modern-day Belgium. Near Ostend, which in itself is on the coast from Bruges, those who've been there. So took about 120 to 150 ships up against 213 French ships. And in a naval battle that was very similar to a land battle in the sense a lot of English, he packed his ships with English archers, longbowmen, and they were able to basically stay at a further distance than the French ships had loads of men with crossbows, but they didn't have as a big a range. So Edward kept his ships back, was firing arrows like there's no tomorrow, basically mayhem in the French fleet, and net result, a massive English naval victory. And here, how about this for statistics? Okay, out of his 120 to 150 ships, Edward III lost 2. Out of the 213 French ships, the French lost 190. 166 of them captured, the other 24 destroyed or sunk. They lost somewhere between 16 and 20,000 French soldiers and sailors in that battle. Crushing English naval victory that none of us know about. Strategically, didn't actually achieve anything in the 100 Years' War, and that's probably why the Battle of Sluys has been forgotten. Although you could argue, some of the land battles in the 100 Years' War didn't ultimately achieve anything either. And we do remember Crécy and Agincourt and Poitiers. So there you go. 26th of June, 1846, the Corn Laws were abolished, or the House of Lords voted to abolish the Corn Laws in England. Great, a really interesting general British history there. Sorry, I'm just reading across, but I'll come back to your comments in a minute. But and of course, what was interesting was, there was it's anti-Corn Law League. Basically, the Corn Laws were tariffs put on corn in England. It was duties put on corn, and it basically benefited all the landowners who owned all the land that produced corn. And if you were poor, living in a city, well, you had to buy bread, which was grossly inflated because of these protectionist racket that you had running in Britain. And so free traders emerged, not least the Anti-Corn Law League under Richard Cobden and John Bright. John Bright, incidentally, came up with the phrase "to flog a dead horse." That was his contribution to the English language. But and it was Robert Peel, the Tory Prime Minister at the time, Conservative Prime Minister at the time, who, against most of his party, but with the support of the Whig opposition, pushed through a reform of the abolition of the Corn Laws to take those duties off the price of corn. So an interesting bit there. Let me just have a quick look how we're doing over in the things. Cara, saw your thing. Yep. Totally agree with you, Michael. People said to me, I recently asked, what was some of the greatest British battles? And someone said, are you talking about British victories? And the answer is no. I mean, the ones that come at the top of the poll that people are nominating tend to be victories because we remember those. I mean, I'm a Tottenham fan. I remember when we win FA Cups. I don't remember the ones where we lost in the 4th round, So even if they're great matches, don't remember them particularly. So not surprisingly, people remember victories. But interestingly, there were quite a few nominations for 2 great defeats, actually. Yorktown comes up as got quite a few nominations, as does the fall of Singapore in 1942. Because when you think about it, both of those defeats, you can't call them great British victories, but I'll talk about great British battles or great battles in British history. And you've got to argue both of those changed the course of Britain, the British Empire, the world forever. So yeah, battles come in all shapes and sizes, and the British don't always win them either. In fact, I tell quite a few. In fact, I get a bit of flack from people who say you're always gone about British defeats on YouTube, like the Battle of Maiwand and Battle of Isandlwana and the Battle of Intombe in the Zulu War. But I do have quite a few victories in there as well. But to a certain extent, the victories are, well, they're boring, aren't they? The British turn up. And like Omdurman, in fairness, the British turn up and they mow down loads of Mahdists in Sudan. Well, that's an exciting story. Didn't see that one happening with a flotilla of ships all armed with machine guns. It's much more interesting when actually it goes off script, rather like Isandlwana in the Zulu War, and the British basically get bitten on the backside. And I think we all enjoy those, don't we? So yeah, Indian Mutiny. Indian Mutiny is an event. I've covered some of those things, but that changed a lot of things, actually, and changed relations, not least actually changed how the British viewed India going forward. I would argue, this is my view, okay, that there were people who, any whiff of independence, potential rebellion in India. After the Indian Mutiny, they had a mindset of the Cawnpore massacre. In other words, if we let it get out of control, that's what could happen again. And my view is, I think that partly drove General Dyer to commit the act that he did at Amritsar in 1919, where he just let loose, massacred hundreds of demonstrators in Amritsar. I'm not defending him. I'll put that out there now. At the time, he had his supporters and he had his detractors, even in Parliament and in the British military. And I would definitely be on the detractor side. But I can understand how his thinking might have been shaped by the Indian Mutiny. Not defending his actions at Amritsar whatsoever. But can you see, once you've got that narrative in your head, it justifies in your mind, it justifies the actions you then take, doesn't it? We all sort of subscribe to that in our own ways in life. Right, cracking on, 27th of June, 1743, the Battle of Dettingen, the last time a British monarch led their troops into battle. This was in the reign of George II. So surprise, surprise, it was George II who led his troops into battle. It was during the War of the Austrian Succession. Won't go into all of that now, but it basically pitted France against, at the Battle of Dettingen, we had France against a combined Austrian, Hanoverian, because the Georges had Hanover as well as Britain, and British army. It's actually called the Pragmatic Army. And basically, George II presided over a victory at Dettingen in modern-day Bavaria in southern Germany. Again, it was one of those victories that actually didn't achieve very much in the long term for the war. But there you go. Last time a British king or British monarch led their troops personally into battle. So there we go. Let's just have a quick look, because suddenly things have gone up. Charlie Manson, defeats are probably more important than the victories. I think so. And you could argue, the British Army at the First World War, Charlie, had learnt a lot by the setbacks that they'd received at the hands of the Boers in the South African War in 1899 to 1902. And Uncle Heavy's basically just gone and said exactly the same without mentioning South Africa per se. Yeah, I think Kara. Yeah, I'd agree with you. And I'm not defending mindsets, but we all have mindsets. Okay, each of us have views not just about British history, but about people in our families, and that is a part of the narrative. And we will defend the actions we take because of the stories that we believe in. It's human psychology. Ooh, that's a bit deep, isn't it? Right. Jeff Smith, Boer War. I know your message has just been retracted. I don't know. Was that because you spoke Boer differently? Predictive text struck. Yes. Easy Gamer. The people of the South in the Civil War had a lot of unanswered. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not just a British thing. Plays out in the USA. Absolutely. Yeah, I did notice actually that suddenly there was a whole lot of messages came up. So I think there must have been a freeze somewhere in YouTube or on the YouTube feed. Right, let me just finish off where we are in British history, okay? So 28th, which is, where are we at? So today, 28th, hallelujah, finally got there after an hour. 28th of June, 1461, Edward IV is crowned King of England, or Edward is crowned King Edward IV of England. This was the beginning, this is in the Wars of the Roses, and this was the triumph of the House of York. He had, his father, Richard of York, had been the main claimant from the Yorkist side. He'd kicked off the Wars of the Roses at the first Battle of St. Albans. So it's Richard of York, leading the Yorkists, versus King Henry VI, leader of the Lancastrians. Won't go into it now. Fascinating history. Done a video about explaining the Wars of the Roses here on YouTube. So check it out if you're interested in it. Also, I did a whole mini course. I was talking about the Story of Britain course. Well, I also did one way back in the day, very soon after I'd started the history about the Wars of the Roses. It was a 6-parter. And that was back in the days when I only had 95 supporters. Can you believe that? 95 supporters. 25 of them paid £25 each for this course. I thought I was like a history god at the time. but fascinating. It was fascinating researching it, because obviously to do it properly, I had to go lift the lid and really go in and find out a lot more about the Wars of the Roses than I'd known at the time. Maybe I'll revive that sometime. It's fascinating. But anyway, Richard of York versus Henry VI kicked off at the Battle of St Albans, the first Battle of St Albans. Richard the York basically ends up being killed at Christmas 1460, is killed at the Battle of Wakefield. And the Yorkist cause has just lost their leader. And the new leader of the Yorkist cause is his eldest son, teenager, Edward, Earl of March, based down near Ludlow in Shropshire, and which is the family lands, or the Mortimer lands. Remember, I've talked about the Mortimers in the past. Okay, well, the Mortimers are here, and he was part of the Mortimer family as well. So Edward managed, his first challenge was that an army, a Lancastrian army, his dad had been killed by the Lancastrians at Wakefield, major victory by the Queen, and she was now advancing on London, and suddenly and in fact, actually, she then defeated the Earl of Warwick at the Second Battle of St Albans. So she was now marching on London. Edward was now faced by a Lancastrian army that swept out of Wales, led by Owain and Jasper Tudor. And funny enough, we hear about the Tudors a bit more in English history, don't we, or British history. But at the Battle of Mortimer's Cross, he actually defeated, this young teenager defeated the Lancastrian army led by the father and son Tudors. And if you're trying to work out, okay, so where does Henry VII fit into this? Henry VII is Owain's grandson. His father was dead, so Jasper was his uncle. So you had Jasper, Owain, and then down Henry VII. And so anyway, and then later in so that was in the early part of 1461, and in March 1461, Edward then triumphed at the Battle of Totem up in Yorkshire. Henry VI fled to Scotland with his wife and son, and coming back, Edward IV was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey and ushered in the rule of the Yorkist house in England, which obviously ultimately ended at Bosworth Field, where young Henry Tudor was triumphant, with some betrayals there as well, just like Clive and the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey. Victory, to a certain extent, at Bosworth was due to treachery, just like defeat for the Nawab was due to treachery at Plassey. Different continents, same old stories of human ambition and treachery. Fascinating, isn't it? Uncle Heavy, the Wars of the Roses are all about chocolate. Yeah, I don't know if elsewhere in the world we have Roses chocolates by Cadbury's, but certainly big chocolate brand here in the UK. Thank you very much. Boxes are getting smaller and smaller every Christmas. Jen, has there been a date when nobody has been fighting? Good question. There must have been somewhere, surely to God. I'll go back through my records to see where in Britain. Not many, actually, in just in British history. So if you throw in the rest of the world, even when there's blanks in Britain, I guess there must have been someone somewhere, Aztecs or the Zulus or Chinese, or someone had been fighting someone. But there you go. Where are we at? So let's finish off. 28th, same day as today, 28th, but into Victorian, or not actually Victorian times, 1830, just before Victorian times, still technically Georgian times. The first Metropolitan Police officer to be killed on duty. Bit different. Jen, it's not a battle, but it is a death. 9 months after the Metropolitan Police had been formed by the Home Secretary, Robert Peel, who we just mentioned when he became Prime Minister with the Corn Laws. But back in 1829, he had formed the Metropolitan Police. 9 months in, and the first police constable is killed on duty. PC Joseph Graham, aged 31, was killed in a drunken fracas. He was trying to break up a drunken fracas. He wasn't drunk. He was killed in a drunken fracas in North London, or in Somerstown area of London. Somerstown is the area between St Pancras and Euston stations in London. Okay, and he was in the fight between these rival drunkards. He managed to get kicked in the head, and he died of his injuries. So the first person to ever be killed in the Metropolitan Police in the line of duty. PC Joseph Graham, aged 31, on the 28th of June, 1830. And let's just round the week off. We've just gone across the top of the hour, but hey, this is the last of these free ones we're going to have. So why don't I just keep rolling? Hey, 1837, 30th of June, 1837, we have the pillory is ended. The use of the pillory is ended by an act of Parliament. So the pillory was very often they're called stocks. That's actually the wrong term for them. Stocks were where you basically sat and your legs were, you sat with your legs through a hole in some wood and it was closed, so you couldn't go anywhere. That was a form of punishment, humiliation. But the pillory was the one where you stuck your head through the hole and your two arms. This famous, probably one of the most famous pillory pictures or cartoons was of Titus Oates Titus Oates standing in the pillory. It was a punishment. It was a punishment really to humiliate you. The pillories were in the centre of a town, normally in a market square, and you were stuck there for everyone to ridicule you. Not only could they ridicule you and see, like, maybe I bet there's one or two folk who think wouldn't be a bad punishment nowadays, but not only were you ridiculed, but of course people were encouraged to throw rubbish at you, old cabbages, whatever, bit of fruit, tomatoes. There are actually occasions, reports of people being seriously hurt and indeed being killed ultimately in the stocks, because there's always someone that throws something a little bit too hard and a little bit too violently, stones, whatever. But anyway, so in 1837, 30th of June, 1837, Parliament outlaws the use of the pillory. Interestingly, the stocks, the ones that you just sat in with your feet, they weren't outlawed until the 1870s. So there you go. But interestingly, as I say, the pillory used for humiliation, and it's still even though it's not used as a punishment, it is in the English language, because people are pilloried for an opinion or something, especially very often politicians. But they are pilloried. In other words, the people go for them in the press or go for them in a public meeting or something like that. I don't mean physically. I just mean they are pilloried verbally. So that's the stocks. And let me finish off the very last one for today, and then I'm going to come back to some of your comments. 30th of June, 1940. The Germans occupy the Channel Islands. This is at the beginning of the Second World War, or at least not the total beginning, but this is a follow-up really to Dunkirk and the British evacuation from France. The Germans had swept through France. The Battle of France was effectively over. And the Channel Islands, which sit just off the coast of Normandy, in fact, they are the remnants of the Dukes of Normandy's realms. When old Duke William came over and conquered England in 1066, Channel Islands were a feudal, he was the feudal lord of the Channel Islands. And the kings of England, or the queens of England, have remained that ever since. So they're called an overseas territory or a dependency, but they've got this slightly strange relationship with Britain. They are not part of the United Kingdom. They have no parliamentary representation in Westminster, and they can set their own taxes and do a lot of their own things. So anyway, Channel Islands were right off the coast of France. Britain had just been, it desperately got out of France, not least Dunkirk, but places like evacuating Saint-Malo and places like that. And Channel Islands, excuse me, were sitting ducks for the Germans. Couldn't easily be defended, although Hitler thought they would be. In fact, by the 21st of June, all British military personnel had left the Channel Islands. And there was a rapid attempt to remove as many people from the Channel Islands, civilians, as possible, including, interestingly, 5,000 schoolchildren from Guernsey. And bizarrely, they ended up in the part of Cheshire where I lived until moving down to Worcester. And on the school board in Bunbury, the village where my kids went to school in Cheshire, there is almost like a scholarships board. And on the scholarships, several kids in the 1940s got scholarships to the local grammar school in Nantwich. It's now Malbank School. And several of them were from Guernsey. And I couldn't work. And I was thinking, well, what have they got a scholarship for? To go to a school in Guernsey during the Second World War when it was occupied by the Germans? But no, it was because these kids were from Guernsey, were living in Cheshire and were winning scholarships to go to the local grammar school in Cheshire. So on the 30th of June, the Germans arrived in Guernsey, or they'd already had a reconnaissance flight and realised that the islands weren't being defended, and the Army of Occupation moved in and took over the Channel Islands. The Channel Islands were to remain, the Channel Islands principally, Jersey and Guernsey are the big ones. You also had Alderney and Sark. Alderney had mainly been evacuated, actually, but Jersey, Guernsey hadn't been, and Sark remained. In fact, Sark's a really interesting one. There was actually a feudal lord until the early 2000s. Okay, there was a feudal lord in charge of Sark, the last feudal lord in Britain or in the British Isles, and they basically said to all their tenants in Sark, no, stay here. No one evacuates. And she was actually a lady. She was called, forgotten her name. Sybil Hathaway was the dame of Sark. Anyway, all four islands were occupied by the Germans and remained so until the Germans surrendered at the end of the Second World War. Hitler was actually convinced that the British, because they were the only bit of British territory that had been occupied by the Germans, he was actually convinced the British would want to get them back. So almost, if D-Day happened, the first off, Channel Islands would be attacked first. And that's why they were heavily fortified. And a lot of those fortifications remain to this day on the Channel Islands. But actually, the British and the Americans between them decided that Channel Islands, had a huge German garrison there. It was going to be like the German sort of, Iwo Jima, I guess. And they took one look and thought, might as well just leave them there. They can't go anywhere. So they left the German army sitting there for the rest of the war. They were sort of effectively under siege. And eventually, when Victory in Europe was declared, on Victory in Europe Day, the Germans were still in control of the Channel Islands, as indeed there were places like Denmark. But they on the 9th of day later, that was the 8th of May, on the 9th of May, a British destroyer turned up and it accepted the surrender of the German garrisons in Jersey and Guernsey. A day later, the 10th, it went over to went to Sark and accepted the surrender at Sark. And then a few days later, it went to the German garrison at Alderney surrendered as well. So, and the Channel Islands, an interesting story, because it's almost like went back to one of the things I was talking about and would like to have as one of our discussions in the History Chap Supporters Club. It's just, what would have happened if Britain had been occupied? Because I think we all like to think there had been this mass resistance movement. We'd all been fighting on the beaches, but would we? Vichy France, or France is a really good case in point. Some people did, like de Gaulle. People in the French resistance continued, and then there was others who collaborated, some just because that's sort of what you did, and others very enthusiastically. And sort of the Channel Islands were a little bit, the Channel Islands had a lot of soul searching to do after the Second World War as to who had collaborated and quite what collaboration actually meant. And I'm not standing in judgment. I think, as I say, I think it's an interesting one. What would you do if you're a police officer and you now accept orders from a German police commissioner? Are you a collaborator, or are you just getting on with your job? Interestingly, the officials on the Channel Islands have actually been told they had been given dispensation to follow orders that were given to them on the Channel Islands. But interestingly, the Lord Lieutenants had been removed from the Channel Islands. And that was quite symbolic, because technically, if you think about British Parliament generally, but the same applied on the Channel Islands, on Jersey and Guernsey, laws have to be passed by the King or the Queen. And therefore, by removing the Lord Lieutenants, who are the King or the Sovereign's representative, any laws that were being passed by the municipal authorities and then the authorities in Jersey and Guernsey could not be effectively rubber stamped by the monarch or their representative. So nothing that technically was happening in the Channel Islands was being endorsed by the British regime. Subtle little point. Interesting little point. So there you go. What about that? What have we got? Cogwheel. Yes, James. Did I ever go to Cogwheel up in that's up near that's up near Wrexham, isn't it? Just outside Wrexham. So yes, James, I did. And also Eulo Castle. Well, not there's much left of Eulo Castle, but of course Eulo Castle was built by the Welsh as a defence against the English, which I always find quite fascinating. That we tend to remember all the castles that, because they're still standing, that were built by the English. But actually, you know, there's a great history there in North Wales. Love Welsh history. Don't know enough about it, and I'm rubbish at the pronunciations, as you just found out. Bill said, "Could I cover the Channel Islands?" Yeah, I'll cover the Channel Islands sometime, Bill. I hadn't thought of it until I did the research, little bit of research for today's talk, but would love to do that for you. Mafeking. Chip, are you saying should we do? I found his stock. Oh God, we're off into Mafeking. By the way, folks, have a look at my video in YouTube about Mafeking, Siege of Mafeking, Baden-Powell, later the founder of the Boy Scout movement. Got a lot of his ideas actually from having a cadet force of young boys running errands through the besieged town. He seemed to enjoy being besieged a lot more than Cecil Rhodes did down in Kimberley. Cecil Rhodes was quite frankly a pain in the bum for the commander of the British garrison there, whereas whereas Baden-Powell loved every bit of it. In fact, when the Boers called on him to surrender, he suggested that they were having a very good innings and would continue to bat. Very, upper school, British public school sort of thing. And of course, back in England, the papers were lapping that up, because actually the rest of the Boer War at that time, as far as the British were concerned, British public was concerned, was all turning out a bit of a disaster. So he became this celebrity. And he used that celebrity status later on to help found the Boy Scout movement. Cara said, recommend the Jersey and Guernsey Potato Peel Society, the book, not the dire excuse of a film. Yeah, the film doesn't appeal. The book, thank you very much for the idea, Cara. And when people are talking of dire films, quite a few comments on YouTube on my channel about the dire Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare film. But then, it's Guy Ritchie. It was never going to be a history documentary, was it? But there you go. Do I have a video covering the Battle of Yorktown? No, I don't, James, but I will be doing one. And of course, I'm very conscious that we are rolling towards 250th year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, just over a year's time, 2 years' time. And so I'm pacing myself to start to tell the story of the American independence, but and some of the battles there. Maybe from a slightly British perspective, but also from my British folks, actually just tell you what the hell happened, because most people don't know. But most Brits will not have a clue who Benedict Arnold is. My Americans, know exactly who Benedict Arnold is, and you'll have opinions. But again, we talk about treachery. We talked about the Nawab of Bengal being betrayed. We're talking about I can't remember who else. We talked about someone else being betrayed, didn't we? I can't remember where we were at now. No, I can't remember. But Benedict Arnold potentially going to betray the American Revolution to the British authorities. And there wouldn't have been interesting. Again, there were moments in the American War of Independence where it could all have gone the other way. Arguably, I don't think it would have created a United States or the United Kingdom of North America and Britain. I think the die had been cast, and even if there had been a military defeat, I think the hankering for freedom and the fact that the British government really weren't willing to give that, and George III as well, and allow proper representation in Parliament, means that I think the cause would have still been there. It would just manifested itself in different ways. But I stand to be corrected on that. Maybe that's one we should have a debate about in my history society, in my history club. How about that? Maybe it's what if the Germans occupied Britain in the Second World War? But how about what if the Americans had lost the War of Independence? That would have been a good one, wouldn't it? Cara, so when shall we all meet again? To paraphrase Shakespeare, it'll be next Friday, Cara, for those of you who've joined the History Supporters Club. I'm looking forward to that. And then I'll be populating. I've already got a date for the bi-monthly history quiz. Can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but and that will be an evening UK time. We will just move around. I'm going to see as the membership develops. I am just going to move around and see, where we've got supporters from, because I know for a lot of my American fans, you're up at this time. That's great. for my fans, supporters, whatever, enthusiasts who exist, and they do exist down in Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Rim area, Hong Kong. Actually, this sort of time is a disaster zone because it's already now nearly midnight in that part of the world. So just bouncing around and maybe throw in some extras specifically for people in different time zones. But let me see how it goes. Appreciate the bulk of my supporters tend to come from the UK or British Isles. That's the UK really, and a fair few principally seeing people from the east coast of the USA. So there we go. John, got to go. Bye for now. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend, mate. Cara, nice to catch you on the other side. Thank you everyone for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've enjoyed a little bit about, or at least understand a little bit why I'm making the decision I am to bring everyone together who really is an enthusiast and wants to learn more, wants to go down a few more rabbit holes, wants to share their knowledge, share the community with people who have a love and a passion for British history, just intrigued to find out more. And wherever you live in the world, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me today. Thanks for all your support. And I will see you, well, hopefully very soon. As I say, video coming out next week. We'll crack on with it about the Battle of the Boyne. Just like the two blue touch paper, and away we go. Have a great weekend, folks. I'm down in Bath. Don't know if anyone's got any lovely plans, but I'm going to be down in Bath. Doubt I'm going to have a chance to read my book, but I'm sure as heck we'll be doing a little bit of history there. I'm sure I'll find a pub. There's bound to be a pub in Bath that claims it's the oldest in England, because let's face it, we all know in England, every town has a pub that claims it's the oldest in England. And some of them are pretty good. One of my favourites, favourite historic pub. I come from St Albans. That's where I was brought up. The old Fighting Cocks. Yeah, I think the old Trip to Jerusalem, pretty good going. One of the people in my supporters club, Mark took me, met up with me in London last year. Mark took me to the old Watling on Watling Street in London. It was built by Christopher Wren, built while he was building St Paul's Cathedral, built for his workers. How about that? He's building St Paul's Cathedral, and as a side gig, we'll build a pub for my workers. And that was obviously it was a tavern, they could get a drink, some of them could stay there. And actually, he drew some of the plans for St Paul's Cathedral in the upstairs room at the old Watling in the city of London. So some wonderful ones. I quite like the prospect of Whitby down on the River Thames as well, down in what's now down on the Isle of Dogs. But yeah, prospect of Whitby is quite a cool one as well. Dickens wrote some of his stuff there, but then lots of pubs where he wrote that as well, wasn't there? I think Spaniards Inn's another one. Anyway, we're off on a massive tour around English pubs, and that's just my tour of English pubs. God knows what yours are. Leslie, the Red Lion in Salisbury. There we are. I've let the cap. I was bringing it all to a final conclusion, and now I've just opened it again, haven't I? It's like a bonfire night or the 4th of July over your side, Leslie. Anyway, folks, enjoy the weekend wherever you are. Hope the sun shines on you. Thanks for all your support, and whatever you do, choose whether you're going to join the History Supporters Club or not. By all means, for a free one, just sign up for my newsletter instead. But thank you for everything you do, all the support you've given me, continue to give me. I appreciate it. So have a great weekend. See you all very soon. Take care.